Okay, the purpose of this video is pretty much to tell you how to program your TI-30XS calculator and make a table. There are a few key buttons that need to be identified in order to proceed effectively, and again, maybe you've seen them, but let's just make sure we're here. The table button is in the upper right next to the clear button. This button here is used to pull up your table or to start the process of making a table. So again, that's the button you're looking for there. Your X, which is a variable button, is next to the 4. I guess I should have probably type next to better, but anyway, there's your 4 button, there's your X, Y, Z, T, A, B, C, and what you'll notice in general form, again, for those of you who like to play around a little bit, if you hit X repeatedly, it changes variables, and what that does for you in when one form, which again, I'm not going to show you that here, but it actually allows you to type in x squared plus 2x plus 5, and as long as you have a variable value attached to x, it will actually evaluate that based off of what value is in X. But anyway, your arrow keys we've used, I hope, up, down, left, right, up here in the upper right area, and the enter button, of course, is that. So the arrow keys is how you navigate, how you move around. The enter button is also how you kind of move around as long as you are where you need to be. So after finding those buttons, it's just important that you become familiar with what the menu options mean. So let's just walk through some of these things together and give you the opportunity to kind of see where we're going with all this stuff. So if we look at the equation y equals 8x minus 2, which we should know how to graph, where the slope is 8 and the y-intercept is negative 2, let's make a table of values from negative 5 to 5. So x, y, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this would usually take a whole lot of effort to do because you would have to actually plug in all those values. But if you learn to use this table button, again, what you'll do first is hit the table button. And if there's something there, clear it. And in all honesty, if something weird's going on, just hold clear and press on to reset the memory. That way there's nothing crazy going on anyway. But hit the table key and then go ahead and type this in. So type in exactly what you have. You see that it already has the y equals. So all you have to type in is this side. So 8x, which is that x button, and then minus 2. And just like I've always told you, as long as what you see matches whatever is there, you're fine. We're done with that. So hit enter to select that. It's going to ask you where you want to start. Of course, we want to start with negative 5. So go ahead and type negative 5. We'll talk about the step in a little bit, and we do want it auto-generated. All I'm doing right here is just kind of arrowing through this, but you could also hit enter if negative 5 is good. You could hit enter if stepping by 1 is good. You could hit enter if you wanted auto. We'll talk about ask later. And then hit enter for the OK part, and it should pull this up. And you now notice that it says negative 5, negative 42. So I just put negative 42. Now I'll write it this way. Then you have, make sure you can see it, negative 34 for 4, negative 26 for 3, and then you just arrow down negative 18, negative 10, negative 2, 6, 14, 22, 30, and 38. Sorry you didn't see all those. But anyway, I think that's a lot faster than using a calculator, just typing them in randomly. I think it's also faster than using the recall function, which the recall function is good. You don't always need the table because the recall function does typically do its job, but to be able to do that is good. But I want you to pay attention to the fact that this goes on forever there. It also goes on forever beyond here. All it's doing is pretty much moving your X value and telling you what the X value is. You can hit the clear button to go back to this menu here, and let's say you want to know what was at 50, so we could start at 50 and hit enter all the way through that, and it'll start us at 50 instead of having to click all the way there. If you wanted to go to 1,000, I don't know if it'll do that, but you would hit clear or table. Actually, table takes you back to here. Enter. Let's say you want to start at 1,000, which again, I don't know if that works, but there you go. So that is how it works in general. Here I have to make sure that you understand to use the honor system on this, but what if we wanted to make a 5-point chart for the parabolas that we had before? The 5-point chart, again, is going to have something that you understand, which is in terms of what your key value of X is. So you do have to kind of use your head, but hopefully you worked hard enough to recognize there's negative b, which would be negative 30, divided by twice a, which is 6. Negative 30 divided by twice a would be negative 5. So I should be able to go to my table, hit clear, type this function in. So 3x squared, keeping in mind that x is right by 4, plus 30x minus 5, hit enter. I think I want to start by the key, so I'll just do negative 5, again stepping by 1. And here is your hint that this is where you need to be, because the 80 is surrounded by two numbers that are the same. 68 above 77, 68 below 77, which means obviously I'm doing okay. So my table would be negative 7, negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3. And again, I can use my table to fill that out as negative 68, negative 77, negative 80, negative 77, negative 68. So whenever you were getting stuck on things and you were wondering what I was doing to check your chart, that's pretty much what I was doing. But again, that's it. You still want to make sure you sorry about that. You still want to make sure you understand the general format of how things work, but again, that helps out to kind of make things a little bit faster for you. This is not intended to make you lazy. It is intended to make you efficient. There is a difference. When you get lazy, that means you don't try to learn the other things because there's a quote-unquote shortcut. But once you know how to do it, being efficient is actually more important. And again, if you're taking an SAT test or you're taking a map test, which I don't think you actually get these on map tests, but if you're taking the SAT test and you need to be efficient to get through something, then using this table will work. Now again, creating a 5-point chart won't work if you sit there and go x squared, let me clear that out, x squared plus x minus 5. Again, hopefully you're practicing this and you simply go through here, because what you're going to notice is that when you get around the key value, you get a duplicate number. And that's because the actual key value should be between 0 and negative 1. Actually, that's one way to kind of see what your key is to kind of scan your numbers and look for that repeat. And that repeat occurs here in between 0 and 1, which obviously tells me based off of this that it should be negative 0.5. But again, check this out. Negative b, which would be negative 1, divided by twice a, which is 2. Negative 1 over 2 means that my key x is negative 1/2. But with that said, you have options. Let's go back to the table real quick. And again, you might want to do this with me just to make sure you understand, because until you do it for yourself, you really don't see it. I'm going to start at negative 0.5. And let's just say I want to step by 0.5, because you can do that also. Your step is typically 1. But again, 0.5 also works. You can step by anything you want. If you want to step by 0.1s, you can change that to 0.1. But you will now notice that what's happening now is I'm going from 0.5 to 0 to 0.5 to 1, from 1.5 to 2, and so on. And when you actually look at this chart now, you do have the number surrounding it. Now, my advice for you when you are making your tables with a decimal is that you don't step by halves, because that's really not far enough. So you do want to step by ones, but I just wanted to let you know that if you do want to step by a decimal, you can. So let's hit clear, go back to here, count by ones again, and use the proper way to do this, which is negative 0.5 is right next to negative 1 and 0, and then I'm going to use negative 2 and 1 as my numbers, which based off of this is negative 5 and negative 3. I didn't even get the key number, but we'll get that. Negative 5 and negative 3, and I'm going to show you how to get the key number a different way right now. So what I will do is go down to ask x, not auto generate, but ask. And when you go to ask, what that does is it allows you to type in the value that you want to check. So I want to check negative 0.5, so I type that in for my x down there, and it will tell me that it's negative 5.25. If I wanted to check 10, type in 10, go. If I want to check 25, this is how I check your tests. Whenever I make a test, if there's 20 questions, I do 20 minus the number that you missed divided by 20, and then all I have to do is ask, and then I can say if they miss 6, it's a 70. If they miss 6.2 or 6.5, that it's a 68, whatever it might be. But again, that table is very useful for things like that. Outside of a couple more specific needs from this, I think I've actually covered everything you need. It pretty much covers when you do your tables on your graphs. Let me just jump through that. We'll go through some problems together. be sure to pay attention to what I do to get every bit of information necessary, because if I was not showing you how to make tables, I don't need to expect a lot from you. But now that I'm showing you how to make tables, it means that I expect for you to have everything shown and documented like it's supposed to be, because I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom right now. X to the 7th, again, you might want to do this with me just to make sure you can actually practice this, minus 3x to the 5th, plus 2x to the 3rd, plus 1 is my graph. I'm going to go by ones. The key thing here, I should have auto-generated that, so hit clear to go back to that, and go to ask and highlight auto, hit enter, and then go from there. But the key thing here is that we probably want to start at a spot where your Y values make sense. You notice here that we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Commonsensically, you could count by 2s, which would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. But in general, most of the things that I'm going to have you do will probably be counting by 1 unless I tell you something different before the test. But I would just count by 1s, which means I'm going from -6 to -6, 6 to -6. So I would scan this thing until the numbers get to be reasonable. And there they are. So at -1, we have 1. So what I would do is start with -2 because that's important. And that would be -47. Then going to -1, we have 1. Then 0, we have 1. Once we go to 1, we have 1. Once we go to 2, we have 49. I'm sorry, you don't see that. So anyway, what I did was I just copied these numbers. So I scrolled down, -1 leads to 1, 0 leads to 1, 1 leads to 1, 2 leads to 49. And what I was about to say is now the numbers get ridiculously out of hand, which means that that is pretty much the general scope of what I need. Now that's not all the points I need, because as you can see, this isn't going to help. Plot the points that you can, which -1, 1 would be back here and right here. 0, 1 would be here. 1, 1 would be here. 249 would be up there. So either way, this thing is coming from way up here in the sky. So again, I'll kind of put a dot up there to let myself know where it's at. And it's leaving. Is it way up there? I think it's down. It is down. -2 is at -47, which means -2 would be down here. So it's not there, but it is somewhere down here, coming up, doing some things, and then leaving with positive numbers, which means it'll be up here. So again, whenever I put a dot off the chart, that's just my way of telling myself what direction the graph's going to go in the end, so that I don't mess up. Hopefully you learned about degrees, you learned about odd and even. This is an odd function, which means it should be positive, which means it's positive here and negative over there. So if you accidentally go out that way, you are going to miss it. But we do need more investigation. So here's where you're hitting clear and using your table to ask will do some things for you, because we need to kind of get an idea of what's going on in these spots. So let's see where it's at -1.5. So -1.5 should lead me to, and notice how it gives me a fraction. I can go over to there by using the arrows and hit the conversion key, which is, if you haven't learned, the double arrow key. That is negative, pretty much it's 0. So -0.5. So again, I will put -1.5 comma -0.1. So that puts me about here, which again gives me a better idea for what's going on. I also want to know what's going on in between here. So at -0.5. So go back down to this area here. I guess you can just do that here, -0.5, because I'm highlighting my X. That gives me another fraction, which again I can just kind of hit enter, hit convert with that highlighted, and it turns it to 0.83. So make sure that goes on your chart. If that's a point that you used, make sure it goes on the chart. So -0.8, and you don't really need to go beyond tenths. That's good enough for me. So 0.8 would be pretty much close to 1, so somewhere around here. I also need to know what's going on between here. So at 0.5, let's check out and see what it is. So again, go back over here, 0.5, type it in, check to see what that value represents, which is 1.1, which would be 1.2. So here it'll be 0.5, 1.2, which is just barely above it. And then let's check to see what's going on at, what's that, 1.5. So go back over here, put your 1.5 in, highlight the fraction that you want to see, convert it, that is 2.1. So 2.1, which makes sense because based off of what we see, the graph should come up, hit this point here somewhere, go back down, go back up, come back down, and then go out. And again, I'm not going to grade you for specifically how that line curves, but I know it should be shaped something like this. Now, here's another thing you can do if you want to, which is try to check what's going on in your quarters. But again, you could also do that by going back here, starting at, let's say, -2, actually -1.5, and move by 0.25, because again, that will give you idea what's going on here. And what that will do is give you some numbers. So -1.25, which is here, would be at 1.4, which is actually higher, isn't it? That would actually be here. So this graph is actually even more than we thought, because it actually goes up, then comes back down. So again, as we have this table, we have to do more and more investigations. If you gave me this table on a test, I'd probably give you credit for it just because of the fact that you at least went somewhere beyond just using regular whole numbers. But as you begin to get more specific, I expect for you to kind of use some 0.25s here and there. I screwed you up on that, but again, I'll take the blame for that. But just make sure, again, that you're going as deeply as you can into it. So I guess as we're learning this together, because I've never really taught people how to use this calculator before for tables, we will just use the quarters and walk through anyway after we do our numbers. So going back to here, I hit hold clear, press on to clear my memory here. Go back to table, type this in, -4x to the 4th, plus 5x to the 3rd, plus 2x squared, plus 3x, plus 1. Go through here, and again, I'm just going to start at 0 and auto generate and see what happens with these numbers. Again, notice that these numbers are ridiculous until you get to 0, or till, I guess, -1. So we'll start from -1 and go from -1 to wherever the numbers start to get ridiculous again, which is really quickly. So I guess 2, because 2 is where it's jumping back out that window. So -1, 0, 1, 2. Using those numbers that we have -9, -1, I'm sorry, -9, 1, 7, and -9. So again, -1 would be a -9, which means it'll be a dot somewhere off the screen. 0 is at 1. 1 is at 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's not too far off the screen, so I'll actually count that one. And then 2 is at 9. So that is definitely off the screen. So whatever it is, it's leaving the screen and there. So this is definitely one where I need some quarters in between. So I'm going to go back to my table, hit enter on that, start at, let's say, -1, and move by quarters, because again, what we just saw is that quarters actually tell you more about what's going on. So -0.75 is at -3.5. And you should again do this kind of on your own. I don't know if I'll be able to keep this on the screen. -0.5 is at -0.9. -0.25 is at 0.3. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. 0 we already did. 0.25 is at 1.9. 0.5 is at 3.4. 0.75, and I am adding this to the table every time I say it. You just can't see it because I've got too many things going on here to try to keep you entertained. It's 5.2. 1 is at 7, and we know all those points. So let's plot these points here just to see what's going on. -0.75 is at -3.5. So that's a half, that's a quarter. -3, 1, 2, 3.5, which would be about here. Negative 0.5, which is at a half, is at negative 0.9, so negative half is almost at negative 1. Negative quarter is at 0.3, so here to about there. Again, not expecting perfection in terms of your locations. 0.25, because we already got there, is at 1.9, so quarter here is 1.9, which would be about there. Yes, there. 0.5 is at 3.4. 1, 2, 3, almost a half. And then 0.75 is at 5.2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.2. So we can kind of see now what this graph is doing, which is it's simply going up, moving over, and going back up. Now I did kind of forget something here on this other one. And what it said is approximate the x value of relative maxima and minima. So we can, based off of this graph, we can approximate the x value at negative 1, because that would be a maxima. Also at 0.5. But of course, we're going to do better now that we have our quarters. Our relative minima would be somewhere around x equals negative 0.5 and x equals 1. So that would be our picture based off of that. But again, as we get better at this, I will expect for you to have more things like that. In terms of relative maxima and minima here, there are none, because it doesn't stop. It kind of moves, kind of acts like it's going to turn, and then keeps going. So there are no maxima or minima in this picture because that's what we have there. All right. Check to make sure I typed that in right, and hope I didn't waste your time. Negative 4x to the fourth plus 5x to the third plus 2x squared plus 3x plus 1. Yeah, that was the graph that I made. Last one. I know it's a long video, but again, there is a purpose for it. I'm going to clear my whole memory to make sure everything I did is out of there. So x to the fifth plus x to the fourth minus 3x to the third minus x squared plus 2x. And again, I'm just going to do a general run through real fast to find the high and low points. That's definitely out of hand. So I guess negative 3 is where I'll start, because I do want to start outside the window and I want to leave outside of the window. So negative 3 is negative 96 based off of what I had there. And then let's scroll and see where it goes out the window again, which is right there. So 2. So negative 3 to 2. And from based off of this, 2 is at 24. 1 is at 0. 0 is at 0. Negative 1. Hold on. 0 is at 0. What was 1 at? Just to make sure. 1 is at 0. 0 is at 0. Negative 1 is at 0. Negative 2 is at 0. And negative 3 is at negative 96. So obviously, based off of what we see, 1, 2, 3 off the charts. Negative 2 is here. Negative 1 is here. 0 is here, 1 is here, and 2 is off the charts. So we can at least get a general idea for it's probably going to go up, come back down, do a bunch of weird stuff, and then leave. But again, the best thing we can do now is kind of try to figure out what's going on. Did I ever? No, I didn't do max and minimum on the other one. But anyway, so what I'm going to do now, because my table starts at negative 3 is, and again, this is kind of what I'll expect for you to do, is start at negative 3. Count by 0.25, because again, the quarters do make a difference in terms of your parts there. And then let's go ahead and make this table for the numbers that we have that are actually there. We don't need to do negative 2.75 because that's still off the charts. That's negative 50. I think this is still off the charts. If we highlight and convert it, that's negative 22. Negative 7 is still off. I guess we can use that as a mark there. So negative 2.25 is close enough. At negative 7.5, negative 7.4, and then we should go from there. So negative 2 is already there. Negative 1.75 is 2.5. Negative 1.5 is at, again, if you want to know that, just hit convert, And all I'm doing right now is just scrolling down on the right side, and anything that ends up as a fraction, I convert it. So 2.3, negative 1.25 is at 1.2. Negative 1 we already had. Negative 0.75 is at negative 0.7. Negative 0.5, this is a lot to go through, is at negative 0.8. Negative 0.25 is at negative 1/2. Again, hopefully you're doing this for yourself and kind of verifying these numbers. 0 we already have. 0.25 is at 0.4. 0.5 is at 0.5. My wife's about to break into the house. 0.75 is at 0.22. So just 0.2. 1 is at 0, we know that. Almost there. 1.25 is at 0.6. 1.5 is at 3 point something. 3.3. 1.75 is at 10. 0.1. So we have enough points. And if the complaint is that's a whole lot of work, I want you to imagine doing this without a table. So it is work, but that's why I said to make sure you respect this stuff, because it's really not as easy as it seems. Negative 2.25. Hopefully I didn't write anything crazy. Negative 2.25 is at negative 7. So 1, 2 1/4 should be barely off. I'm going to negate that. Negative 1.75 is at is at 2.5. Wow, that goes up quickly. So negative 2.75 is here. Negative 1.75, which is inside, is at 2.5. So 1 1/4 is at 2.5. Negative 1.5 is at 2.3. So 1.5 is about here somewhere. 1.25 is at 1.2. So 1 1/4 is at 1 and some change. Negative 0.75, which would be here, is at negative 0.7. So almost at negative 1, somewhere around there. Again, I'm not grading for absolute precision. Just make sure your points are somewhere in there. Negative 0.5 is at negative 0.8, so 1/2 is a little bit lower. Negative 1/4 is at negative 1/2, which puts us about there. 1/4 is at 0.4, so 1/4 is at almost 1/2. 0.5 is at 1/2, so that actually does reach 1/2. 0.75 is at 0.2, so just barely above. 1.25 is slightly above 1/2, which is 0.6. 1.5 is at 3.3. That goes up high. 1, 2, 3 1/3. And then 1.75 is far enough at 10. So there you go. There's your picture. So what we want to do is make sure we kind of come from this direction, go through this dot here, curve, come down, hit these dots, go through those dots, and curve back as we go up. Once again, I will not grade you for absolute precision, but you should not have a graph that looks like this when it looks like that. So as it is set up, that is what we're looking for. Talking about relative maxima, will be at, that's negative 1.75. Another relative maxima is at 0.5, so what's that? 1/2 based off of this chart. A relative minima would be at negative 0.5, which is here at negative 0.25. and also here, which I believe is at 1, which is at 0. So again, it is a long process, but you do have all the keys now to do it. Hopefully you take this week seriously. That's why I said make sure you actually got ahead over the weekend, because if you're trying to do all this stuff with 5.3 this week, that's going to be a kind of a tough call, but I still think you can get enough out of it. But just be careful and make sure you're ready for that test next week. Outside of that, I'll talk to you later. Be sure to ask me if you have any questions. Good luck.